A Bills star revealed Buffalo's game plan to try to stop Lamar Jackson in the divisional round. And it's a bit of a wild one for a couple of different reasons. We talk about that, a former Ravens wide receiver sinking his career possibly for good, and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens WR, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe over there. We're a 5-day week plus more daily Ravens show. So every Monday through Friday, we have that daily Ravens coverage for you. Plus, we have bonus episodes. We go live after every single Ravens game and piece of big news, and so much more. So tell a friend, tell a family member. We're here for them. We're here for you on Locked On Ravens with the Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. Get started with $200 in bonus bets if you want to lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Man, it feels like this week is moving really slow, but also it feels like it's flying by. I've lost track of the days at times because it's the playoffs and you just want the games to get here. The Ravens will play on Sunday at 6:30 against the Bills. Primetime football, going to be, in my opinion, the absolute game of the week. No questions asked. Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. In the first part of the show, we're going to be diving into a Buffalo Bills defensive star talking about the team's game plan to try to stop Lamar Jackson in the divisional round. And I don't think he was wrong in his assessment, but I think it is a little wild that we are to this point with Lamar. So we're going to talk about that whole situation and what he had to say in the first part of the show. Then a former Ravens wide receiver has sunk his career, and maybe he's actually even sunk it for good. So we're going to dive into that as well. And it's a name that we've been talking a lot about over the last couple of months. I didn't want to lead the show off with it because we've been talking about him so much. I wanted to get something new in the first segment. So we'll dive into that. And then finally, Kyle Van Noy, he just went in on the Steelers. He ripped Pittsburgh, and I want to talk about what he said and how it actually applies to Baltimore for the rest of the postseason and why I think it is a good sign. So let's start off here with the Buffalo Bills star, that being Von Miller. Von Miller went on the Let's Go podcast, and obviously that is with Jim Gray, Max Crosby, Peter King, Belichick is on there, and Von and Max are really close, and they talked a lot about how pass rushers, it's a tight-knit community with the pass rushers, especially from what Von and Max were talking about, where they kind of bounce ideas off of each other. Von said they were doing that for years, and he says he turns on Max Crosby film, and I'm sure he's going to be doing that when trying to stop Lamar. But Max Crosby actually agreed with Von on his point. But when asked about how to rush Lamar, he ended up saying, going against Lamar Jackson, you don't want to rush too conservative, but you don't want to be too reckless at the same time. You've just got to play your game. He's going to make plays, but we've got to be in situations to make plays as well. And cage rushing those guys each and every play is not effective. It's Lamar Jackson. He's going to make plays. You just got to rush, man. You've got to be conscious of where you're rushing and how you're rushing. You have to know where he is. You have to know where the chipper is. But at the end of the day, you just got to go out there and play your game. I don't think Von is wrong with what he said here, because I agree cage rushing Lamar does not work anymore. And for those that don't know what cage rushing is, it kind of is in the name, where it's not necessarily about getting all the guys to the quarterback, but instead kind of setting up a cage almost where you can bull rush your blockers from a lineman position into the opposing quarterback, and then the guys off of the edge kind of converge, and that sets up that cage. But with cage, you're essentially saying, okay, if we get to you, we get to you, but you're going to want to, it's about keeping that mobile quarterback in the pocket. It's a strategy designed to keep mobile quarterbacks in the pocket. We are far past that with Lamar Jackson. In fact, we were never really in that era with Lamar Jackson, where the strategies on how to defend him have evolved. And the reason why I think it's kind of wild, and it's not about what Von said or anything, I just think it's wild because you hear some of the things that Von said in his answer. He said, got to be in situations to make plays. It's Lamar Jackson. He's going to make plays. You don't want to be too conservative, but you don't want to be too reckless. You just got to play your game. You have to go out there and play your game. It just feels like there's no real strategy in terms of one weakness that you can hone in on with Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying the Bills aren't putting together a game plan to try out some certain things, but there were books on how to effectively stop Lamar Jackson, or at least more of them earlier in his career. Again, making him throw was not one. Okay. That was outdated and nothing about that was even true in the first place. But for example, that Miami game a couple years ago on Thursday Night Football is actually more than a couple, but still that exposed that, hey, if you blitz Lamar, that's a super effective way of slowing him down. Now Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league against the blitz. You can talk about rushing his internal clock and forcing him to make tough decisions. Well, Lamar's decision-making, I thought up until last year was pretty up and down. But again, as he's evolved and as he has grown and been a starter in the league, that decision-making has gotten a lot better in these past 2 seasons. We have seen him at the peak of that, starting off with obviously taking check down options, something that he wasn't doing early in his career. I think for a lot of people, it was kind of screaming, Lamar, just, take the short stuff, take the check down. And he wasn't doing it as much. And now he is doing that. He's effectively working through everything. And that just comes with growth. That comes for every prospect. So if you're the Bills, you look at Lamar Jackson and what he's done this season. I mean, the way to stop Lamar is just to throw him off his game, get him off his rhythm. And part of that can be winning quickly at the line and getting pressure on him that way. But you have to win so quickly against Lamar, because if you give him time and opportunities in the pocket, again, it should have never been about keeping Lamar in the pocket and trying to stop. Because yes, there is truth to the fact that when Lamar gets outside of the pocket and can start to either improvise or buy time for himself, whether it is to develop a rushing lane or to let his receivers work back to him and develop those routes, that's a dangerous Lamar Jackson, right? That is something that, it gets off script. You can't plan for that. Keeping him in the pocket is more of okay, we know where he's going to be and he's going to make a throw from that pocket. So if you cage him in, that's okay, we know where he's going to be, but it's not effective to keep him in the pocket because he will slice you and dice you up, especially with the separators and the route runners that the Ravens have on their roster. Now, will Zay Flowers play in this game? I'm not sure. We'll hear from John Harbaugh today and throughout the rest of the week. I can't really put a prediction on it right now. I think there have been varying degrees of reports on whether, he will or won't play, but we're still early enough in the week where we don't know. But if you keep Lamar in the pocket, he's going to dice you up if you can't get pressure on him. And if you let him roam away and get outside and let him do his improvise and his Houdini magic, well, that's just bad news for you the other way, because he's going to either take a rushing lane or he's going to find a receiver. Because as we've talked about forever on Locked On Ravens, if you're an everyday, you've been listening to me for years, you know this. With the secondary, it is with each second that goes by, it gets more and more impossible to cover, and it's less and less likely that you're going to be able to, whether it's plaster a guy if you're in certain situations or just stick with a guy. Lamar has evolved to this point where I know we use the cliche a lot of keeps defenses up at night, keeps defensive coordinators up at night. In my opinion, Lamar Jackson does just that. And do I mean literally? Do these defensive coordinators lose sleep? Well, actually, man, maybe. Probably some have. I'm not going to lie to you. There might be a defensive coordinator or two that either is game planning for Lamar or after playing Lamar can't sleep because of either the threat that he's going to be on the field or the performance he just dropped on that guy's defense. But again, it's kind of crazy because at the end of the day, Vaughn is saying it's almost, he's not saying this, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, so, don't take it that way. But the way that I kind of hear this is, look, you have to play your game. That means you just got to hope that something happens. Trust in yourself. There's no real strategy. There's no real weakness you can just spam over and over and over again, like we saw with some of those blitz things a couple of years ago. Sure, there are some things that can throw Lamar off his game. There are some areas where maybe he's not as strong, but we even talked about last season, the deep ball accuracy with Lamar and pushing the ball down the field. Something Lamar and the Ravens were not doing a ton last season. And we all said last season, man, it'd be really cool if they could open up that deep passing game. Well, the Ravens and Lamar have been a lot better at that this season. Lamar over the past 2 years excluding this one, so 2023 and 2022, the deep ball accuracy wasn't really there, and 2023 was a really rough year deep ball wise for him, but he has improved on that. It just feels like for all of the stuff that we have said about Lamar and some of the real weaknesses, because again, there are weaknesses that people talk about that are rooted in hate and rooted in a lot of other things that just aren't true and just are ridiculous. But when we talk here, it's like, okay, yes, there are real things Lamar can work on. I've never come on here and said Lamar is the perfect player. I'm still not going to come on here and say that because there's no perfect player in the NFL. But Lamar has continued to craft his game. And it's not like, okay, spam the blitz or his internal clock is, if it's sped up, he's going to make bad decision after bad decision. We have grown past a lot of that for Lamar Jackson, where yes, some of it will creep up sometimes, right? I'm not saying it doesn't. Lamar still sometimes backs up instead of throws the ball away and gets tackled for a 15-yard loss, or he'll make a bad decision here, or, he won't take a rushing lane there. There are things that Lamar still doesn't do great on a consistent basis. But from where he was to where he is, it is night and day. And that, to me, is the challenge for these defenses. And for a Buffalo team that has talent on all three levels, it becomes that much harder for them to stop Lamar Jackson if, one, the run game gets going, if, two, you can work the play action off of that, because that creates a whole different thing. And I think Vaughn is making another good point where he says, he talked about consistency and discipline in some of his answers as well, but not too conservative, because again, if you just want to say, okay, we're going to make Lamar throw, and okay, we're not going to be too, conservative with this whole thing. Like, we're just going to sit back and let him do his thing. That it's going to end badly for your defense. Lamar will absolutely obliterate you, like we talked about. But if you get super aggressive and start blitzing, like we've seen teams do, Lamar will just get the ball out quickly. Like, the Ravens have the weapons to do that now, and Lamar understands, and the game has slowed down for him over the course of his career to where he is really good at that now. So you also, in a cage situation, if you want to talk about the cage concept, you don't want to rush your guys too far up the field, and it's about staying in your gap, staying disciplined. But again, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually execute it on a consistent basis against this Ravens team. So again, the Ravens offense, it looks unstoppable. Is it truly unstoppable? No. There are some ways that you can slow it down, especially if you can stop the Ravens on early downs, if they can get in their own head. But this is what we've been talking about, where it seems like the way that you beat the Ravens is to let the Ravens beat themselves with penalties, with bad mistakes, with, maybe losing the turnover battle here or coaching decision. It just feels like when you talk about a strategy to stop Lamar, it becomes a lot more complicated, and you kind of get to, you just got to trust yourself and not try to do anything out of the ordinary. Just go rush the guy, and that'll be that. So I think it's awesome how these conversations have evolved, because we can go back 5 years and talk about a way that you can stop Lamar. And now we can go back 3 years and talk about another way. But here we are, 2025 now, crazy to think. And Lamar has improved so much in those areas. But coming up in the second part of the show, we will end the Von Miller conversation with a fact about the Ravens that he did not know that he definitely should have. And it was really interesting that he didn't know this. So we'll dive into that, as well as a former Ravens wide receiver. He absolutely sunk his career and might have done it for good. So be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. And the FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back for our second segment. Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you, talking on this midweek edition of the show. Now just days away from the Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to like and subscribe here on Locked On Ravens, video form and audio form, for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. You're not missing out either which way you decide to watch or listen. Be sure to follow me on social media, Twitter at ChaosStrecker34. We have a great community of over 40,000 people over there. And on Instagram, trying to build that community up, almost about 1,500 right now. I've started and stopped my Instagram like 500 times at this point, but I'm starting it up again. So you can follow me over there at ChaosStrecker34 for more Ravens updates as well. Let's end the Von Miller conversation. There's one more thing we have to talk about with that. I was shocked when I heard this. Again, this was on the Let's Go podcast, so be sure to check out the episode. And they have a bunch of great guests over there. Again, Max Crosby, Jim Gray, Peter King, Bill Belichick is on there. They have a really good thing going. Von Miller was on, talked about how he said the Bills could stop Lamar and how he game plans and what it's like to rush against Lamar. Now, when asked about the Ravens in general, he said, quote, they've got a really good football team, very well-rounded, talked about the defense playing lights out, the offensive line playing really well, obviously talked about Lamar, but he did not know who the coach was of the Ravens. Knew it was a Harbaugh, but he did not know who the head coach was of the Baltimore Ravens. He said, John Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh, which one? And he got reminded, he said, it's John, one of the Harbaughs, one of the Hall of Fame head coaches, and made sure it was not a bulletin board thing. He didn't mean it as a shot. Now, again, some people might take it as a shot, but Von made it very clear. And I want to make it very clear. He said this, that he did not mean it as a shot. There was no shot intended from Von. But I mean, how do you not know the coach of the team that you're going up against? Then I know this was recorded, I believe, on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it was Monday. Monday, January 13th. So I guess that he was just starting to prepare. He just came off the Denver game, so maybe a lot going on in his mind. But again, it's not like John Harbaugh started coaching the Ravens last year or this year. I mean, he's been with the team since 2008. It's been almost 20 years since John Harbaugh took over the Ravens. I mean, I feel like Von should know who coaches them, and maybe it's confusing because I guess Jim is in the league again now, but I don't know. I thought that was a little crazy that Von did not know which Harbaugh coached the Ravens, and he didn't know it was a Harbaugh, and I guess the double J, John, maybe that did something. But yes, John Harbaugh, for those who don't know, I hope everybody knows, is John Harbaugh that coaches the Ravens. But Deontay Johnson, it's a name you haven't heard in a while. I'm just kidding. You heard it probably a couple weeks ago because he was in the headlines for the Ravens for what seemed like a month straight after only being on the team for 2 months. Well, he's back again. Somehow, some way, Deontay Johnson made his way back in the headlines, and it's for a reason that you will not guess. Actually, you will, because it literally happened to the Ravens. Deontay Johnson was cut by the Texans yesterday, and all of these reports about 30 minutes after it happened, it was yesterday afternoon it happened, all these reports started dropping about the exact same situation that happened in Baltimore happening in Houston. And this to me is utterly ridiculous that this is Deontay's mindset. And again, I don't know what's going on with Deontay. I don't know, what's going on with him personally or anything, but this is not a 1 or 2 time thing. It happened in Pittsburgh. It happened in Carolina. It happened in Baltimore. It happened in Houston. So according to multiple reports, Deontay Johnson was visibly upset and dejected in the Texans locker room due to lack of playing time and targets after Houston's wild card win over the Chargers. Teammates had to come over, try to calm him down in his locker in the middle of celebrating the victory. Again, this is exactly what happened to the Ravens. Aaron Wilson reporting that after the game, Johnson was visibly upset, and teammates were trying to calm him down. It's displeasure with his role. It's a recurring theme for him this season. Chancellor Johnson saying that in the locker room, he seemed a bit dejected, and a couple of Texans captains came by for what seemed like encouragement at his locker. And then Adam Schefter put out a huge piece on ESPN about the whole situation and how the Texans waived Deontay, and he was fully dressed, sitting in his locker, staring in frustration because of a lack of playing time and targets. Joe Mixon and Azeez Al-Shaair tried to comfort and encourage him. And it's unbelievable that we are having this conversation again about Deontay Johnson because, well, actually, I should maybe take that back. I guess it's not that unbelievable because we literally saw it unfold. And I know that a lot of people bashed on the Ravens for the move, bashed on the Ravens for letting him go instead of keeping him on the roster. The Texans had the same mindset the Ravens did, and the Ravens had the same mindset the Panthers did, and the Panthers had the same mindset the Steelers did. But this is in general, just when it comes to locker room toxicity, players that don't contribute positively to your locker room culture. It is better to just get rid of that, get it out of your building, instead of having it kind of fester and infect everybody. Because look, this is a guy, this is the thing I actually can't believe about the whole situation. Because again, I don't want to harp on it for too long because really it doesn't have any bearing on the Ravens anymore. I'm shocked, but I'm not. It literally is the exact same thing that happened with the Ravens. The thing that I'm shocked by, though, is that he came into a place in a matter of 1 month in both places, less than 1 month in Houston, just wore out his welcome. I mean, a guy did that fast. The reports I've seen about Deontay, and this goes beyond, the locker room stuff. Like, I'm talking personality wise. Apparently, he has a good personality. And I think that honestly was shown when, after the Ravens and Houston game, all his former Ravens teammates, or not all of them, but, Lamar and Isaiah Likely, Derrick Henry was there, I think a couple others. They were joking with Deontay and hugging him, jumping up and down with him, like they were having a good time. The personality of Deontay Johnson, and from what I've read, I don't think that's the issue. But in those reports about what his personality is, like, his bubbly, whatever personality, the issue is when things don't go his way, his mood can be very volatile. And that's the issue. Where, again, it's not like Deontay is this terrible person, like from a personal perspective. From everything I've read, he's not. Apparently he's very likable. But when things don't go his way and you kind of have that volatile personality, that's where you get dicey, and that's where it just doesn't work. And, Robert Woods, Texans wide receiver, talked about it and said, everybody wants to be utilized, everyone wants to have a role, but this is the NFL, and I'm going to keep it at that. So the Ravens, I think, made the right decision to move on. I know, a lot of people at the time didn't think so. I was kind of on the fence about it, where it's just like, okay, this guy is talented on the field, he can contribute. But, clearly all these teams have the same mindset of like, you want to get rid of that. And the Texans didn't like what they saw, didn't like that mindset shift from Deontay. So they got rid of him. And again, Baltimore could have used a guy like Deontay on the field here with Zay Flowers being injured and the uncertainty, obviously, of him playing or not in the divisional round and him not playing last week either in the wild card. But it's not worth the talent when you have a locker room, because locker room culture, one, it's sacred, and two, it can contribute to you winning or losing, because that rubs off on everybody. And so that's why they got rid of Eddie Jackson. It's why they got rid of Deontay. And I think that those two, now, hindsight 2020, but even then I'm like, you know what? It's probably the best decision to just have him festering around and, not making any positive impact overall. So that is that. Deontay Johnson, hopefully this is the last we hear of him in terms of from a Ravens perspective. I truly, sincerely hope he can turn it around, but who's going to want to go out there and sign Deontay after all this? He's been on 4 teams in 4 years. People forget he got traded from Pittsburgh this past offseason to Carolina. Carolina tired of him. He traded him to Baltimore. Baltimore didn't want him. He's in Houston. Now Houston doesn't want him. He's a free agent. He's sunk his value. I don't know if he's ever going to recover from this from a football perspective. It has been a very bad year for Deontay football-wise, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to recover from it. I hope that he can for his sake and he's able to become a positive influence in locker rooms, but clearly that has not been the case for him over the course of his career so far. And it's unfortunate. Really talented guy and apparently a very likable guy as well. But, when you leave your team out to dry like that, or you're not celebrating success, team success, because you didn't get your personal success, that it just creates a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So that's that. We hopefully, and again, won't have to talk about Deontay anymore from Ravens perspective. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the Steelers again from Ravens perspective, because Kyle Van Noy ripped on them for a couple of different reasons. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high-quality candidates. I know from experience how important it is to make the right hiring decisions, and having access to insights like what skills candidates have or how they're connected to your network. That helps you feel confident when you pull the trigger. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Locked On Ravens, Kevin Ostreicher here on Wednesday. Appreciate everybody again for being here and being with me as we dive into Ravens football every single day on Locked On Ravens, whether you're an everydayer and you've been here with me from the get-go, or you listen every single day, regardless of when you found the show. Really appreciate you listening. If you're new to the channel, hit that like and subscribe button and welcome into the show. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you for your consistent support over here on Locked On Ravens. Now, Kyle Van Noy absolutely ripped into the Steelers. For those that don't know, and again, hopefully most people watching this do, the Ravens beat up on the Steelers 28-14. It was an incredible win for Baltimore and propelled them to the divisional round. One of the things that Pittsburgh did, and it surprised me at the time, I'm sure it surprised a lot of other people as well, is they took the ball first. They elected to receive instead of defer. Now, usually, again, for strategic purposes, you want to get the ball to start the second half. And if you can stop the opposing offense on their first drive, you have the opportunity to, stack some momentum and then get the ball back in the second half immediately. And that can propel you to a whole different level. But the Steelers decided to take the ball first. I'm sure because they probably felt that they needed to get out to an early lead in order to have a shot in this game. Clearly, they did not do that. I think there was a 3-and-out, or maybe they got one first down, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a short-lived first possession. And Kyle Van Noy on the McCoy and Van Noy podcast with Gerald McCoy, who also was a former player. Kyle Van Noy said, the first thing I thought when that happened was desperate. That's when I was like, oh, wow, we won. We were all pissed off about that. And then, kind of went on a different tangent, different conversation, and said how we stood on business. Their defense getting almost 300 yards rushing on them. I'd be pretty embarrassed if that happened to me. It really leaned into the whole, it was embarrassing for Pittsburgh, which, he's not wrong. It was embarrassing for the Steelers. But we also, I talked to Nick Moore on Kevin and Zach React, do some work at the Ryan Ripken show, and Nick said that the whole team was kind of miffed by it and pissed off by it. And I think Nick even singled out Roquan as being someone who was really upset with it. And they all took that personally. So when we talk about bulletin board material, sometimes that bulletin board material can happen 5 minutes before the game kicks off. It can be little things that can motivate you like that. And when the defense was able to stop Pittsburgh on that first drive, and Kyle Van Noy said he even knew before that, when the Steelers had that happen, when they said, yeah, we're taking the ball. Oh, yeah, we won. Kyle Van Noy was that confident in that. It's what the Steelers had to do. But again, this game was 21-0 at halftime. The Ravens also got the ball back. The game felt over in the first quarter. If the Steelers had gotten the ball in the second half first, maybe they would have had an opportunity to get out to, okay, you score 7 points. All right, well, now it's 21-7. Can you move? And the third quarter actually was decent for Pittsburgh. They outscored Baltimore 14-7, but again, it's the momentum that Pittsburgh didn't have, and the added fact that Pittsburgh did not make any new friends over on the Baltimore sideline by having that decision be made. So I understand why they did it. Do I agree with it? No, but it helped the Ravens win, and I am totally okay with that. So I'm really excited for the divisional round. Again, these are two great teams in Baltimore and Buffalo, two great quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I think that, again, I've said this throughout the whole MVP conversation that, obviously everybody has their picks. Mine is Lamar. Other people might have Josh Allen. Both guys are great, and I don't want to sit here and tear Josh Allen. That's never been my goal, to tear Josh Allen down, because I think it's going to be an absolute joy to watch both these guys play on Sunday. It'll come down to a bunch of different things, and we'll obviously have that coverage for you throughout the rest of the week into the weekend on Locked On Ravens, and Sunday cannot get here fast enough. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form, and follow along and subscribe in audio form. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens coverage here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back in tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.